Jordan Green is an investigative correspondent based in Greensboro, North Carolina, who covers right-wing extremism for Raw Story. His work has been featured in a host of publications, including The Washington Post, The Daily Beast, The Nation, In These Times, Sojourners, and The Assembly. Today, he joins us to talk about covering and being stalked and threatened by neo-Nazi groups, and the threat militant far-right accelerationism poses for the country. Hi, Jordan. Welcome to The Signal.
Hi, Cyril. It's great to be with you.
I was reading through the Assembly's newsletter in my inbox, and the Assembly is a great digital publication out of North Carolina reporting on place and power. And I came across the headline, "I've seen how the neo-Nazi movement is escalating. You should worry." This is a type of headline that reaches through the screen, grabs you by the neck, and forces you to read the article. And what this piece is a reflection of your experience reporting for the Raw Story, where you are a North Carolina-based investigative correspondent. And it starts with your reporting and writing of the article, "Inside the Neo-Nazi Hate Network Grooming Children for a Race War," then goes into some of the blowback from your reporting, which includes having you and your family being stalked and threatened by Nazis, and concludes with your reflections about the danger or dangers of militant accelerationism, which potentially lies ahead for our country. So the beginning is as good of a place to start as any. Take us back to December 2022, when you started reporting on this story. How and why did it come across your radar, and then where did it take you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I started with the December 2022 because that is when a person or persons shot out two electrical substations in Moore County, a county that's not too far from where I live in Greensboro. It became fairly clear to me that they were neo-Nazi accelerationists, although no one has been arrested to date, but this is something that is very much an interest as a tactic for accelerationists. Yeah, as you say, I mean, that kind of, I reported on an accelerationist for years before, but that really kind of got me started down this path of sustained reporting on a large network of militant extremists who are interested in this kind of activity. I should add too about the Moore County attack is that people may remember that it took place on a night when there was a drag show in a county seat of, or a larger town in Moore County. And so people, I think, with some grounds, connect the two, that the attack on the substation was kind of a attack on LGBTQ people. There was a lot of, at that time, and still today, there's a lot of kind of agitation against trans people in particular, and targeting of drag shows. So, yeah, I kind of outline in the story how this event took me forward to more than a year, culminating with the Nazis showing up in front of my house. But it's kind of hard for me to remember all of the events. But
Before you go on, can you explain to listeners what accelerationism is?
yes, absolutely. It's a tendency, not limited to neo Nazis, but very much embraced by neo Nazis, of utilizing terrorism, and that's what they call it, terrorism, to melt down, to in their hopes to bring about a collapse of society. And oftentimes, this scenario involves fantasies of a race war. It's a tendency within the neo Nazi movement that rejects politics, meaning elections, and also the idea of building a mass movement to bring about a national socialist state. I mean, they believe that they can only birth this society that they want through violence and purging. It relates to the a book from 1979 that written by a neo-Nazi called the Turner Diaries, which popularized the phrase "Day of the Rope." So, this idea also includes a kind of purge of all of the political opponents. politicians, journalists, academics, and through mass executions, basically.
Yeah, this tactic employed by the broader white supremacist right, was also utilized and championed by groups like the Boogaloo Boys, which people might remember, who were kind of like in the headlines, I guess maybe like 3, 4 years ago.
I would push back a little bit on the Boogaloo Boys. They are like very tended to be more libertarian, although there are some neo-Nazi elements. Yeah, I mean their idea is kind of like leaning against the Second Amendment and kind of a ultra individualistic. Accelerationist ideas were embraced by a neo-Nazi group that kind of peaked around 2019 called Atomwaffen, and another group called the Base. But there are some linkages between the ideologies and the groups. I don't want to say that there's no link, but
No, thanks for that clarification. I had just thought that they had actually used accelerationism. I remember I believe there was one Boogaloo boy who had shot up a police station during the protests in Minneapolis in the summer of 2020, the anti-police protests. But getting back to your story and your reporting, can you take listeners through, how you were reporting on these neo-Nazi networks? Were you talking to them? Were you using social media? How did that work?
sure. And first, I'll just mention I think the incident that you're talking about, there was a Boogaloo boy who shot a federal officer in Oakland around the same time period of the George Floyd protests. And then there was another Boogaloo boy who went to Minneapolis ostensibly to in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter protesters, but ended up getting indicted for material support for Hamas. And yeah, to answer your question about how it communicated with the Nazis, I mean, basically, I monitored them on Telegram, which is a social media platform with very little moderation, and it tends to be a haven for neo Nazis and all kinds of violent extremist conspiracy theorists. Oftentimes, they'll have their channel will have an email address, and so that's kind of the most direct way that I tend to reach out to them.
Tell us about the group 2119, what their name means, who they are, and what you learned about them.
Yeah, so I T119. Not sure that they're that active now, but at the time that I was reporting on them, they were a teenage network of neo Nazis from say ages 13 to about 18, although one was in his early 30s. They typically used Telegram to put out violent propaganda agitating against Jews and LGBTQ people, African Americans primarily. They promoted vandalism against different groups such as these and used it as a recruitment. And basically, people would, who young men who joined their group would be encouraged to commit acts of vandalism, document it, and then send it in. And then they would put together these, what they called edit videos, propaganda videos. They were kind of, definitely part of the milieu of, Nazis that embrace terrorism and accelerationism. And I actually first saw a reference to their group. T119 is an alphanumeric code for blood and soil crew. I saw a mention of them in these Telegram chats where people were discussing their excitement about the Moore County substation attack. So they kind of crested in 2023 while I was reporting this. So yeah, I did get some digital harassment and phone calls from people who were identifying themselves as members of 2119. And then there was an incident before the Nazis held the rally in front of my house in which someone called in a bogus pizza delivery to my house, and a member of 2119 posted a photograph of me on a Nazi Telegram channel. So I would would tie them to that incident for certain.
And they doxed you publicly. They gave your did they give your address out or post your address publicly?
It was allies of 2119. First, a neo-Nazi in Tennessee named Sean Kaufman, and then a channel called Appalachian Archives. I strongly believe that that channel is operated by a former soldier named Kai Nix, who is now awaiting trial on charges of failing to or lying on an application for military service by failing to disclose his membership in an insurrectionary group. Mr. Nix. So I have surveillance photos of a truck that was parked outside of my house for about 30 minutes around the time that the pizza delivery took place. The photograph that was taken and showed up on Telegram was taken from an angle of from the direction where the truck was parked, and the license plate came back to Kai Nix.
What kind of impact has this had on you, kind of mentally and emotionally, knowing that you are kind of being stalked and threatened by individuals and groups who embrace political violence and see journalists like yourself as legitimate target in their war?
I'm just committed to doing the work, and it just seems like absurd to me that any journalist would. Well, speaking for myself, like I can't imagine myself stopping and not reporting on violent Nazis because they try to intimidate me. To me, it's just like a red line. Like we don't let Nazis try to dominate and bully us. And the kind of society that I am committed to of pluralism and diversity, and that lifts up and celebrates the gifts of every person, regardless of race, sexual orientation. Women, women and men, and that's what I'm committed to. So I don't know. I mean, it does take a toll, and that's what the piece is about. I don't want to downplay that. My ultimate interest is in finding ways to become more resilient, not only as individuals who want to undertake this work, but as a society for us to support each other. I've gotten immense support from other journalists and people in the community, and different people are vulnerable based on their race, gender, and sexual orientation, the kind of work that they do. And, we really have to, I guess, be thoughtful about where we're situated and find ways to support each other, because what is meaningful support for one person might not make sense for the other person. So, sorry for the long-winded response. There's a lot to think about. So I'm rambling and trying to kind of cover it all.
And during this time, you were actually in contact with the FBI, or the FBI reached out to you to kind of warn you about the threats to you and your family's lives,
That's
correct?
right. Yeah, I mean, it was a strange situation, and have very mixed feelings about the FBI for reasons we probably don't have time to go into here. But they told me that, or the agent told me that my life was in danger, and I was found that to be credible based on other things that I had heard. So, I if the story doesn't make it clear, we did get a heads up about the Nazi rally at our house, and so the story opens with me being in a hotel in downtown Greensboro and monitoring the house through surveillance cameras. I just thought, best to avoid any conflict that would put my neighbors in danger. I, whew, I mean, it is tough to think about my neighbors unwittingly stumbling upon this group, and thank God that didn't happen. And but yeah, ultimately felt like it was better for people to not show up and mouth off at these Nazis. I wouldn't say, philosophically that's where I stand in every instance, that people should not physically confront or put their bodies forward or raise their voices and directly confront Nazis. So yeah, it was kind of a tricky. I guess it was kind of a tricky thing to navigate.
So, why do you think these movements, these neo Nazi or broader white nationalist or white supremacist movements, why do you think that they are such a clear and present danger right now to this country?
Well, I think it's been growing for, I mean, the accelerationist movement has been growing since the end of the last decade. And just to limb the history a little bit, coming out of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017, a lot of Nazis decided to kind of go underground because of the blowback about that event. And to give them their due, the FBI has been successful at dismantling the two of the larger groups, Adam Waffen and the Base. But this movement has like continued to metastasize online in a more decentralized format. And these ideas are not going away. I mean, thankfully, we haven't had an attack of, on the scale of the Christchurch attack, where a terrorist killed 51 people by shooting up two mosques. But we have had large, really bad attacks, like the Buffalo mass shooting in a grocery store in 2022. And it's not for lack of trying. They continue to try to put out manuals and encourage other people to commit mass shootings and attacks on infrastructure that could have serious repercussions. As I note in my piece, there are, and at this point, you know, in the federal government, we're in a pretty drastic slide towards authoritarianism or fascism. And these ideas, the language is not dissimilar to the militant accelerationists, with calling immigrants invaders, for instance. And so I think we really have to be on guard.
Yeah, in addition to that, just the kind of, mainstreaming of, parts of their ideology, like the so-called white replacement theory, where, you would hear that being kind of regurgitated, from Fox News, to the president's mouth himself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like another concern, is with law enforcement, and you talked about a few of the successes the FBI had recently, but we had former FBI agent Mike German on back in
Oh, great.
December. Yeah, he was on to talk about his new book, "Policing White Supremacy: The Enemy Within," and he had explained that for years, and this predates Trump, like law enforcement really failed to take far right extremism seriously, while also tolerating it within its own ranks. But of course, with the Trump administration, I feel like it is getting worse. It's not making progress.
Mhm.
If anything, it's going backwards. And Mother Jones reported last month that the Trump administration stripped the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, whose mission is averting terrorism and targeted violence. They stripped them of its funding, and most of its 40 plus personnel had been fired, reassigned, or otherwise pushed out, while also putting 22-year-old Thomas Fugate, who has zero experience in almost anything, never mind, terrorism prevention, in charge of this, DHS body.
Yeah. And I would add, the State Department shut down just earlier this month the Countering Violent Extremism office. Very small office, but their job was to build partnerships with allies to identify and intervene in extremist terrorism. So yeah, it's just another example of the Trump administration dismantling the bureaucracy that protects Americans from terrorism. Yeah, and I have been, watching. the FBI closely. I mean, this is kind of a story that is still unfolding. I honestly, I haven't, I probably monitor a dozen or so cases that are winding through the court system, federal court system, and I haven't seen any evidence to date of the FBI leadership intervening in a serious white supremacist terror case. They have changed some of the nomenclature. They used to they have a classification of racially and ethnically motivated violent extremism, and sometimes and now increasingly they use the nomenclature nihilistic violent extremism. In fairness, there are some attacks that are ideologically ambiguous where that actually fits. Sometimes it's ambiguous, but anyway, I guess to my larger point, yeah, I mean we're still trying to kind of study the FBI office politics, which are opaque. But from what I can tell, I mean, I guess my sense of it is that Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, they recognize that the line agents and the leadership at the local level is really kind of making the cases, and if they want to have some wins, they probably shouldn't tie their hands too badly. And there's the prosecution of Terragram, which how would I describe it? It's a propaganda outfit that directly solicits people to carry out acts of terrorism, and it's international. And they did just bring the first two leaders were indicted in the United States last last fall, and they did just bring an indictment against a third defendant. So that's heartening. I mean, to know that there's still the FBI is still investigating and the DOJ is still committed to prosecuting and dismantling Terragram.
Do you have any stories in the pipeline that we should be looking out for that you can kind of give us a hint about what it's going to be about to whet people's appetites?
Sure. I've gotten just a tremendous response from the story published in the Assembly, and I'm heartened that I've kind of achieved my goal of putting this issue of militant accelerationism on people's minds. And so I just want to continue to use that platform to tell the story more deeply and just to try to tie together some different threads. I mean, something we haven't talked about too much is these kind of nihilistic mass school shooting groups that are kind of tied in with child sex abuse material. And there is a connection with the neo-Nazi terrorgram space, and they kind of tie that together. And how, unfortunately, it's really terrifying that there are, young people who are not white boys, people of different races and girls too, and that are being kind of sucked into this world and in my view, manipulated by white supremacists. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm going to try to explore going forward.
And what's the best way for folks to follow your work?
I'm on the staff at Raw Story, so definitely check the Raw Story website. And I'm also on Blue Sky, so you can just do a search for Jordan Green and you'll find me there.
Great. Well, Jordan, we'll be sure to link to you on Blue Sky, as well as your recent article in the Assembly and your past reporting on published in the Raw Story as well. But I just want to thank you again for the work that you do. Thanks for coming on The Signal to talk about it, and we'll be looking for your future stories soon.
Thank you so much, Cyril. I really enjoyed it.
This has been The Signal, a podcast by the Bucks County Beacon. I'm Cyril Migaleko, editor-in-chief and host. For more progressive news, analysis, and opinion from Bucks County and beyond, go to www.buckscountybeacon.com.